beautiful people, and welcome. In today's video, we are talking about the rules of multiplication, specifically about positive negatives. When we multiply them, what happens? We're also going to touch on the notations of multiplication. So there's different ways we can ask you to multiply, and I would like for you to be comfortable with all of them. All right, let's start with the notations. So there are different ways your teacher could ask you to find the product, okay? So when we are multiplying, we're asking for the product. And before we get too far, let's go ahead and make that thinking bubble. So the answer after multiplying is called product. So if you are unsure if a question is asking you to multiply or if it's asking you to add, subtract, whatever it is, a lot of times when you read the directions, it's going to ask you find the product. So if it says find the product, here's your key word that you will be multiplying those things together. All right, so one of the first things is you're going to see them in parentheses. One of the numbers could be in parentheses. Both of the numbers could be in parentheses. I'm going to use variables. Variables just represent numbers, but we don't know what those numbers are. So sometimes you'll see it like this. Sometimes you'll see it this way. Mathematicians, if you're in my class, you already know this. Mathematicians are what? We are lazy. So what this right here tells me is that secretly there is a little dot right there. There's also a little dot in between those parentheses inside. And what that tells me is we want to multiply. So speaking of those dots, the other way that someone can ask you to multiply is by putting a dot in between. Now, it can be more than two numbers. It can be three numbers, four numbers, but it's usually with a dot in between. And then the third way is, I'm sure everyone knows the third way because that is what is taught in grade school, and that is something that looks like, my pen works, something that looks like this with an X. Now, we are not going to be using this method because we are now getting ready for algebra. Algebra includes letters in your math, and so this X looks like a letter, and a letter is a variable, and a variable represents a number. So this can be a little bit tricky. So these two are going to be the most common notations that we will be using for multiplication. All right, let's go ahead and do some examples with these notations. I'm just going to draw an arrow from each. We'll do one of each. I'm going to not do this one because in my class, we're not going to be practicing using that notation. So let's say we have 5 times, let me stick to a darker color so that way you can see it. Let's do 5 times 8. And do you see what I just did? Shame on teacher. I said we're not doing it, and I did it. I put that X where it doesn't belong. In this example, we are using parentheses. So again, you can see something like this. So 5 times 8. Again, I don't have my multiplication memorized. I know, shame on teacher. But I'm going to just show you that you can figure this out. Use your fingers. You've got fingers right here. Mine are still numbered from a previous video. So we have 5 times 8. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So I have 8 fingers up. Each finger is 5, so that equals 40. Again, we are multiplying if you see 2 parentheses. Now, it can be more than that. It can be something that is 3 numbers. So let's do something like 2 times 3 times 4. So again, this means that in between each parenthesis, there's a small little dot there that tells us to multiply. Again, mathematicians are what? We are lazy. We don't have to do that little dot. We're not going to do that little dot. Okay, so we haven't done a problem like this yet. So let me go ahead and break it down. First thing first, you're going to just multiply. So this says 2 times 3. Then we have that 4. That is what those parentheses say. So let's do 2 times 3. 2 times 3 is 6. I have 2, 4, 6. Again, 3 fingers. Each finger is 2. 2, 4, 6. I am not done because I also need to multiply by that 4. So I'm going to bring down that 4. And what am I doing? I'm also bringing down that dot for my multiplication. And now I have what is 6 times 4? 6 times 4. And I like this one because it rhymes. It's weird. But 6 times 4 is 24. It rhymes. I know. I'm weird. So 2 times 3 times 4 is 24. Again, those dots are not there originally. It's just parentheses. Anytime two parentheses are next to each other, they are multiplication. Also, if you have a number next to parentheses, so let's do another example. I'm going to highlight my example so that way, so here's example 1, here's example 2, and let's do one more example. So let's do, oh, I don't know. Let's do 12 times 4, and that's equal to, again, this one here, let me number these. This is example 1, example 2, and this is example 3. Sorry, my OCD is kicking in, and these were not labeled. Okay, 12 times 4, that means I have 4 12 times. If you watched a distributive video, you can separate the 12, but this just says I have 12 4 times. So 12 plus 12 is 24, 24 plus 12 is 36, 36 plus 12 is 48. If you didn't do that, you can go the opposite direction. I have 4 12 times. 4 10 times is 40, and I need 8 more, so I have 48. For fours, if you go back to my, what is it called video, it is called multiplication rules. No, that's not what it's called. It is called multiplication tricks. If you go to my multiplication tricks video, there's going to be a trick for multiplying by 4. Go there and then you can watch that. Let's do a few more examples for the notations. This is the other notation where it just has a dot. If it just has a dot, you already know how to do it. How do I know? Because we translated these from parentheses to dots. So you already know how to do it. But let's do one more example and say, oh, I don't know, 7 times 8. So 7 times 8, this tells me multiplication. And here's, I already have my fingers numbered. So here's 7, here's 8. And if you don't know what I'm doing, go watch the multiplying with your hands video. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. 50 plus 3 times 2 is 6. So I have 56. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 50. 3 times 2 is 6. So I have 56. And again, if you did not know what I'm doing, then go back and watch the multiplying with your hand video. So those are the notations that we're going to be working with specifically for multiplication. So we have the parentheses next to each other. We have the dots. If you see a X in between your two numbers, that also means multiplication. In my class, we're going to try not to do that because we're going into algebra and where X represents a numerical value. All right, let's talk about rules. There are a few rules for us to memorize. Yes, in fact, I did say memorize. I know. Okay, so if you multiply, so we're going to write when you multiply. A positive times a positive number. You see how I have parentheses? Parentheses next to each other means multiply. If you have two positives, they end up a positive. If you have two negatives, it ends up a positive. I know that is mind-blowing because when we did the adding and subtracting, when we did the adding, two negatives added together will always give you a negative. This is different when you multiply. Two negatives and multiply together will give you a positive. Then you have a positive times a negative. That equals a negative always. And a negative times a positive, that always gives you a negative. So when I say you have to memorize this, here's how you do it. If the signs are the same, if the signs are the same, so both positive gives you a positive. Both negative gives you a negative. The answer will be positive. If the signs are different, answer will be negative. So one thing I want to point out on this one, when you have, and I'll show it to you via an example. I'll show you an example and it will be easier to understand what I'm talking about. So let's say we have 5 times negative 3. So that means I have a positive times a negative. So I'm looking at my cheat sheet. Here's my cheat sheet right here. I have a positive times a negative. Excuse me. My answer will be negative. Now, I don't want to look at this right now. I'm going to look at my number. Do you see how this one's positive? There's nothing in front. So I'm looking here and I'm looking here. In front of 5, I have a plus. We don't write it because mathematicians are lazy. In front of 3, I have a minus. So if you are multiplying, only multiplying, again, I can't stress that enough. This is only for multiplication. If you have a negative in front of your number, and there is only one negative in front of your number. For example, how many negatives do I have in front of 3? I have one negative in front of 3. How many negatives do I have in front of 5? 0, because I have a positive in front of 5. So because I have one negative in front of 3, my answer will be negative. Then you multiply 5 times 3, 5, 10, 15. So our answer is negative 15. Let's try another example and we'll do the same method. Example 2. Let's say I have negative 3 times negative 2. Look at the sign in front. Look at the sign in front. If you have one negative, then that means your final answer is negative. If you have 2 negatives, your final answer is positive, okay? So I have one negative here. I have one negative here. So here's a negative, here's a negative. The answer will be positive. Now we take our numbers, 2 and 3. Just kidding. 3 and 2. 3 and 2. 2, 4, 6. That is 6 for our final answer. Let's do a thinking bubble. So if you have odd number of negatives. So that means if I have 1 negative, 3 negative, 5 negative, 7 negative, 9, final answer is negative. Shift that up. We'll do another thinking bubble here. If you have an even number of negatives, final answer is positive. Now, even numbers are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Now, this is not the numeric, so I don't want you guys to get confused. So if I have negative 10, 10 is even, but I'm not counting this. We're not counting the actual number. We're counting how many negatives I physically drew. Okay, so I just put one negative, so this is one negative. So let's do another one. Let's say I have negative 10, negative 3, negative 6, negative 5. So I don't care about the numbers. The numbers we're dealing with later. So what I want is, here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, here's 4 negatives, 4 negative total. 4 is even. Final answer is positive. So let's do 3 more examples and then we'll call it good for this video. We'll practice a little bit more. I just want to introduce to you what the rules and notations are. So let's do example number 3. I have -6 times -3. Example 4, I have 5 times 2. And then example 5, I have 10 times, oops, forgot we were doing, oh, how can I save that? I don't know how I can say that. I'm just going to scribble it out. Sorry, guys. 10 times -6. And then example, I said 3 more examples. Let's do 4 more examples. And I'll do -6 times negative, let's do +5. Again, let's work our way up. Just because you see a plus here doesn't mean that you are adding. Those two numbers are inside of parentheses, and if the parentheses are next to each other, there's nothing in between them except a very small dot that mathematicians are too lazy to write. All right, so let's count our negatives. In front of 5, I have 1 positive. In front of 6, I have 1 negative. So I have 1 negative. 1 is odd, so my final answer is negative. 6 times 5, so then I do my 6 times 5. That means I have 5 6 times. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. I have -30 as my answer. Okay, let's do this again. In front of 6, I have 1 negative. In front of 10, I have nothing. Mathematicians are what? Lazy. So we don't write a plus if it's the first number. So I have 1 negative. There it is, 1 negative. So final answer is also negative. So I'm going to write my final answer negative here. And then I do my numbers. 10 times 6. 10 6 times 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Don't be scared to use your fingers. Telling you on a math test, they can take away your calculator, but they cannot take away your fingers. Okay, what's in front of 2? Nothing. That means it's positive. What's in front of 5? Nothing. That means it's positive. Both numbers are positive. That means my answer is positive. Now we deal with the numbers. 5 times 2. 5 times 2 is 5, 10. That's my answer. Let's do our final one. In front of 3, I have 1 negative. In front of 6, I have 1 negative. So that means I have 2 negatives. And that means final answer is positive. So I'm going to write that my final answer is positive. Now, again, mathematicians are what? Lazy. If you don't want to put this plus in front of your answer, that's okay. If you're going into integrated math 1, you're going to assume that you know not to put this here. In my class, you're okay writing that plus in front of your numbers if you want to let me know for sure that it is positive. Now we deal with our numbers. 6 times 3. Again, if you are in my class and you've watched this video before, not this video, but a previous video, you know exactly how to deal with 3s. It is called the multiplication tricks video. Go watch it, and there's a really fun way to know what 6 times 3 is, and it won't take you longer than 5 seconds to do that. Or you can use your fingers. I'm going to use my fingers. You can use the other method if you watch that video. So I have 6 times 3. 6 plus 6 is 12. 12 plus 6 is 18. So I have positive 18 as my final answer. All right, guys, here are your rules for multiplication. If you have 2 positives, the answer is positive. If you multiply 2 negatives, the answer is still positive. If both things are the same, the answer will be positive. If the 2 symbols are different, it doesn't matter the order. If the 2 symbols are different and you are multiplying, the answer will be negative. Another way that you can deal with if you're going to have negatives or not is count the number of negatives you have in front of your number. Don't count the number. count what's in front of the number. So if you have a 2, you're not saying you have 2 negatives. You're saying you have 1 negative in front of 2. You have 1 negative in front of 3. Then you count how many total negatives. I have 1, 2 total negatives. So that means my answer is positive because I have an even number of negatives. All right, beautiful people, that is it. Make sure you have this on like a index card that whenever you get stuck, you can just reference it and you don't have to memorize the stuff. The more you practice with it, the more you're just gonna have to know it, and you won't even want to memorize it, but you will. You're just gonna know it. All right. You have a great day. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.